psychological nudity. It's a term I developed, but what is psychological nudity? It means I attempt to strip away the veneer of deceit or lies about politics to bring you the naked reality of the liberal body politic. Admittedly, it's not always pretty, but it is the savage truth. And here's what got me going this week. If you remember, we had a total collapse of authority outside Chicago. I am talking about the girls' high school football game that turned into a demented hazing ritual and ended up with people getting hurt and criminal charges, I hope, to be filed. My question is, where were the parents? I don't mean at the game. I mean, where were they when it came to teach their girls values? Values and more values. Who would do this to another student unless they're sick in the head? This hazing case is an example of the breakdown of social controls. These kids are afraid of nothing. You know why? I'll tell you why later. Also today, Democratic Senator Byrd and Representative Waxman are questioning the president's trip to the aircraft carrier. They should talk. I have a few questions for both of them about their motives. And we also got our first look at the 2004 presidential hopefuls from the Democratic Party. And by the way, if this is the best and the brightest they have to offer, I am thrilled. I hope it's Sharpton versus Bush. It's coming up on the Savage Nation. And now, by now, you might be getting a little tired of hearing about media bias, media bias, media bias. But the fact is, it's still there and it won't go away. And I'll keep calling attention to it until it does. And I have a wonderful guest who is going to help us expose the liberal leftist leanings of some leading news personalities. And now this week, the Savage Times, which is the news about what goes on in the week, the Savage Times this week is about morality. And the man who made millions by selling morality while losing millions in Las Vegas as an out-of-control gambler. I'm sorry, Bill, there's something wrong with this picture. Where is your morality? Did you let it ride at the craps table? This kind of situation is why Republicans are so unfairly called hypocrites. Also, the president did great in Iraq. He really did. Salute President Bush. But has he turned left since then? I think he has. And we're also going to talk about Senator Joseph McCarthy. Way back when. He's been smeared for years. Was he a witch or a witch hunter? But he's still being trashed by the illiberal left in Washington, D.C. and on the front pages of the New York Times. And I'm going to tell you that there's a lot of evidence that although he was a mean bully, he was also right in most of his charges. And another great guest will join me to discuss it because he actually lived through that period. You're not going to want to miss any of this. And of course, what would the Savage Nation be if I didn't have for you this week's Hollywood idiot? Notice something's missing? It's Hollywood's attempt to censor me for criticizing their golden boys and girls. What do I mean by that? As you know, I usually present a trophy to the winner of this award. You know the trophy. It's a little gold bald man, very famous little gold bald man at that. Well, it turns out that the little gold bald man has a bunch of big red bald lawyers, and they don't like Savage presenting their statue because it's trademarked and copyrighted, and in fact more protected than the White House War Room. So I can't use that statue anymore, but I'm still going to present the Hollywood Idiot Award without it. Where is it? Well, I'm going to use this. It's shrouded. As you well know, they believe in censorship. And by the way, I'm going to create my own trophy. If you have an idea for what it should look like or what it should be called, email me. What should we call it? We can't call it OSCAR anymore. What do you want to call it now? The address is thesavagenation@msnbc.com. If I choose your idea, you're going to win a free copy of my book, The Savage Nation. When we come back, that hazing video from Chicago and what's happening to family values. These are the topics for today, and whatever else pops into my head. Now, you can call America, that's anybody in America who's watching the show right now will hear you, at 1-888-MSNBC-USA. And if you get on the air with me, you're going to be heard by more people than you'll meet for the rest of your life. That's a pretty amazing thing. Be here or be nowhere. I also have some viewer emails for you. Here's a sample of the emails I've been receiving at the Savage Nation. Rich from Grass Valley says, Savage, your show translates well to TV. Michael, the passion and conviction comes through like a runaway freight train. It keeps getting better and better. Another fan named B says, I began listening to your show a few weeks ago. It is so refreshing hearing someone else with my beliefs. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for speaking your mind and the truth. Again, Diane writes to say, I work for the YMCA in July. They will provide benefits for same-sex partners. They have told me that they have redefined the word Christian. Redefined the word Christian. Hold on now. The Romans tried to redefine the word Christian with a few spikes, didn't they? What do you think of this? Is it time to take the C out of the Y? Patty from Pennsylvania has something to say. She says, Savage, I tuned into your show on MSNBC this last Saturday. I'm in awe, and I'm proud to know that there are people like you out there trying to educate the masses. I am a teacher, and I applaud your efforts to save America with the Poor Revere Society. I want to talk about that. I'm a former teacher. I have taught elementary school, junior high school, and college. I was once a teacher, and let me tell you something, you're always a teacher. Gary from New York has this comment about the Hollywood lawyers taking away my mocked-up Oscar. He says they're hypocrites, and they think that they can deface religion, right? They can dunk a cross in urine. They can dunk a cross in elephant dung like they did at the Brooklyn Museum. But God forbid you should try to deface one of their icons, and they're going to go and sue you. Oh, yeah, that's America today. Well, we got loads of callers on the Savage Nation. Another guy, Rich from New York, says, Savage, I've just finished reading your book, The Savage Nation. Let me tell you how much it meant to me. I have always considered myself conservative, but after reading your book, I realized that many of my perceptions have been negatively influenced by the liberals. Savage, thanks for waking me up. Okay, that's it. Be here or be nowhere. I'm Michael Savage. Look at that film. Remember The Lord of the Flies? I love that movie. When the kids go crazy and attack each other when they're left alone on a desert island. It's a classic commentary on the need for unity and control, social controls, in every society, because children are animals if you leave them alone. Never mind the liberal viewpoint, which is that they're all angels. They're not. Unfortunately, many children are pretty monstrous. Now, to drive home the point, the kids in that movie commit acts of horrible brutality on each other. But it's just a movie, right? Yeah, well, that was just a movie. But now, take a look at this. Teenage girls from an affluent Chicago suburb. Now, who should know better? Committing horrible acts of brutality on each other? But this isn't a movie. It's real. And it happened here in America. You think I'm too extreme when I say our culture is declining and family values are eroding? This video is your proof that Savage is not out of his nut. The liberals will use psychology to explain this. You know what they're going to say? This is coming this week, I guarantee it. Oh, the girls were just venting post-war Iraq aggression. I haven't heard that one yet. You know, I expected it all week. One of those women from USC or Columbia who don't know what they're talking about, one of the red diaper doper baby girls, getting up there and saying it's an expression of the aggression from Iraq. It's psychobabble. These girls are showing the direct result of what happens when parents don't do their jobs properly. We've got an entirely new generation of kids out there. You want to call them red diaper doper babies. No manners, no morals. Hey, mañana, here's what I want to know. Where were the parents when it was time to teach these girls right from wrong? And what happened to family values? Isn't this an example of societal breakdown, moral decay, whatever you want to call it? Does reality TV make these kids think this behavior is okay? And why didn't the kid with the camera stop filming and help out? I want to talk about that for another second. I want to talk about it for a second. There's much more to it than just that. It's not just a moral decay. Children have been raised not to respect teachers, not to respect parents, not to respect police, not to respect any authority. What they've been taught is, whatever you feel, do. This comes from, by the way, the French Revolution. A French writer by the name of Rabelais wrote this when he said, "Fais ce que voudras," which is, do as you will. This is a liberal credo. And the more we teach our children to do it if it feels good, why not do it in the road? You know what I'm saying? That started with the 60s. Roll in pig dung if you want. Sleep with your sorority sister. Do whatever you want. Smoke this, do that. Here is the end result. But it isn't the end result. If we don't control these kids, punish them for this kind of thing, and anyone else who acts out like that, what we're going to wind up with is death camps in this country with people not caring. So I'm telling you, it goes way beyond just a few kids having a party getting out of control. That's number one. Our family values eroding in America. 1-888 MSNBC USA. These are some of the topics on the Savage Nation. Let us go to Dave in Hawaii. Dave, welcome to the Savage Nation. What's your topic, please?
Aloha, Michael.
Aloha.
Aloha. Yes, I'm one of the handful of conservatives here in the islands. But, Mike, what I want to get
How do you survive in that welfare state of mind? You've got a one-party system. It's a pure welfare state. How do you make it there?
Well, Michael, I ask that question every day, but I still get up every day and pinch myself of the beauty that God has made here in Hawaii. I mean,
Amen.
I grew up in South Bend, Indiana, so you can imagine.
No Kauai, Hawaii, no Kauai. I live there. I know the place. So what's on your mind?
Well, what's on my mind is, Michael, I was born and raised from a Polish immigrant family. And let me tell you something. We were taught to fear Mom and Dad. I mean, there was no left or right. I mean, you listened and you did what was right.
You're talking about little martial law in the house, right?
Well, there was.
Wait. But we're not talking about beating you. Did your father beat you?
No,
but he scared you to death. If he gave you one look, you know what was coming if you didn't listen to him, right?
That's right. We must listen and do the right thing, Michael. And what's happened with that situation outside Chicago is the parents are missing.
Well, but did you hear what I said a little earlier, Dave? I said this is a result of kids being told, don't listen to anybody. Don't listen to the teachers, the police, whatever. You know what's best for you, honey. So if it feels good, do it, okay? Here's an end result of it. They have no concept. I don't think they even understand what they were doing to those other children because it was all about them and their narcissism. Don't you agree with me, Dave? They felt good smearing whatever they were smearing. They felt good hitting the other girl. They didn't even think about the other girl. They couldn't even project outside their own bodies and their own souls. Why? They've been taught to be narcissists.
Well, and I think, Michael, too, the other big degeneration is that there is no
you know what?
figure.
Do you want them punished?
No father figure.
I think those girls should be sent to jail for what they did.
I agree.
I'm serious about it. Not for effect. They should serve jail time. That's the only thing that'll teach them. In Chicago, John, you're over there. What do you think about the hazing? Is it an innocent thing?
It's not the girl's fault, it's the alcohol. Look at them. You see them drinking right behind you right now.
No. I have to disagree with you. No, that's like saying that you could blame the car for someone driving recklessly. It's the car. It's not the alcohol. I drink at night. I don't go out and beat anybody up. I'm sure you have a drink. You don't go out and beat anybody up. It's what's inside the person that comes out when they drink. That's the whole point. No, that's the new game in town, is blame the substance, don't blame the person. I totally reject that idea. I heard that earlier. Someone had a mother against drunk driving on. Hey, I'm against drunk driving, totally. This has nothing to do with drunk. It has nothing to do with driving. It has to do with the breakdown of our society and social controls because of excessive liberalism. That's the drug that has intoxicated these children, which is excessive liberalism. It's the worst drug in our country. I'm serious about that. I want to show this over and over again. This drove me nuts this week. You know, I want to say this to you right now. If this were your daughter being hit by these children, would you just sit here passively and wait to see if something's going to happen to them? I wouldn't. Let me tell you something about it. Let me tell you, I wouldn't just sit here waiting to see if the authorities will do something. The same authorities, well, I don't want to go down that road. I'm on television now and not on radio. Okay? All right, those are some of the topics that are really boiling inside the Savage Cauldron this week on the Savage Nation. The phone number, again, we have one open line, 1-888 MSNBC USA. Again, the topics go from that to others. When we come back, I'll tell you how the demon cats are destroying patriotism, as you can well imagine. There he is again, Robert Byrd. They haven't yet found an aviator helmet that can fit over a white sheet. And other stories right here on the Savage Nation. Be here or be nowhere. What are these callers? Let's say Democrat statue. Let's get some creative callers up there. 1-888 MSNBC USA. With all of what I put out, all of this horsepower, that's all I'm getting is callers like this. That's it? That's the whole story? Then I'm leaving the stage. I'm not going to sit through this. I want some real callers this week. Stick around. Robert Byrd. Representative Harry Waxman is coming up. That's our president. He's the man. What was he doing? He was lifting the morale of our brave troops. And by the way, my morale and your morale on the USS Abraham Lincoln. Look at the faces of these people. Look how happy they are to see him. He's spending quality time with them. He's giving them FaceTime, and believe me, they deserve it after 10 months at sea, okay? So why are the Democrats bashing President Bush? Listen to this, will you please?
This is not some made-for-TV backdrop for a campaign commercial. To me, it is an affront to the Americans killed or injured in Iraq for the president to exploit the trappings of war for the momentary spectacle of a speech.
All right, Senator Birdbrain also called the president's trip flamboyant showmanship, and Representative Harry Waxman is asking for an investigation into how much the event cost the taxpayers. First of all, what event is he talking about? The aircraft carrier was on the way in. And while we're on the subject, I seem to recall that another president showed up to greet troops in Bosnia in a flight jacket. I wonder how much that and any of his other adventures cost taxpayers. Hold on a minute. Remember when Bill went over to Bosnia wearing the bomber's jacket as though he'd just flown a B-1 himself and dropped bombs on the bridges over the Danube? Yeah, right. Well, we didn't hear anything about how much that cost, and that was a completely staged event. I don't have to bring up Mike Dukakis, do I? Wasn't this an expensive photo opportunity for him? There wasn't even a conflict going on. Waxman is also way out of line. You may not know who Waxman is, and Waxman is this guy who would investigate his local deli to make sure the quarter-pound of salami he ordered wasn't short a slice. This is just a bald-faced attempt to break down patriotism. It's absolute desperation. And isn't it interesting that Senator Byrd, a former sheet wearer, who used the N-word on national television, has never been taken to task for it by anyone in his own party? Okay, let the liberal who's without sin throw the first stone. Shame on Byrd. Shame on the Demon Cats. It's not selling. It's also a shame that they couldn't find anyone better to run for president than the sorry bunch that showed up in South Carolina for the debate last weekend. They just can't get over the fact that they lost in 2000. And they're still hung up on Florida. I want you to listen to this. This is fabulous. Let's just relax and enjoy ourselves for a few seconds on the Savage Nation. No? Here it is. Oh, well, her sound is dead, but I think you get the picture. When Mosley Braun talks, you don't listen. She says that she says we have an unelected president. Let's stop with that for a minute, because I can put it to rest for 1 second. We had a colossal fight. It was the Florida Supreme Court fighting the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd rather have the U.S. Supreme Court trump any state court in the land. That's why we have a United States Supreme Court. It's to make sure that the red diaper doper babies from NYU and Cornell who moved to Florida, became lawyers, and bought their way into judgeships, and then got appointed, if you don't mind, are not going to rule a presidential election. So let's stop already with he's an unelected president, he stole it. That's utter nonsense. We have an electoral college, Carol. We still don't have just the gross number of votes wins. We're not living in another country in another time. Thank God the Founding Fathers were wiser than you. That's why we have an electoral system. Yeah, now we go to the unbelievable story of Al Sharpton, who calls the United States occupied territory.
We're talking about millions of dollars to occupy Iraq when we don't have the money for the 50 states we already occupy.
Yeah, well, maybe he occupies all 50 states with some of the weight that he's lost. But the fact of the matter is that the legitimate candidates would be on a platform with a guy like this, with the Tawana Brawley in his background, the endemic racism in every one of the statements he makes, in my humble opinion, is a very sad statement for the Democratic Party. Listen to Lieberman now. You won't believe this. You got Lieberman ready? Because
no Democrat will be elected president in 2004 who is not strong on defense, and this war was a test of that strength.
All right, well, let me tell you something. Lieberman, by the way, is a legitimate candidate. I don't think he's got the right horsepower or image, frankly, to be president, but he's the smartest one of the bunch. And by the way, he's also been very strong on national security and defense issues throughout his entire career, because he understands the value of a real defense and national security. So my hats go off to Lieberman. I frankly think there's nobody in this pack who can beat George W., and they know it. They're desperate, they're getting guttural, and frankly, I think that unless they come up with someone new, and I hope her name isn't Hillary, there's nobody who can possibly touch President Bush. Let's go to the callers here on these topics. Lawrence in San Jose, California, you're on the Savage Nation. Topic, please.
Yes, regarding the filibustering of court nominees, couldn't that backfire on us potentially if we have a Democratic president that attempts to appoint left-wing flake activist judges?
Well, I don't know what you mean. Who's filibustering?
Well, Senate Democrats are filibustering.
Yeah, they don't want any conservative to be appointed to the bench. They want a rule from the bench, which is what they're doing across the country. Every time the people vote for something, a judge throws it out because they think that that's the way a government should run, which is the lawyers running everything. After the break, liberal bias in the media. It's still there. And I'm here to change all of that right here in the Savage Nation. I want to end liberal judicial activism. Let's get back to the Constitution. I'm sick and tired of it.
Tomorrow at 10, high school.
They use the term fair and balanced reporting. It's really a code word for conservative bias.
Yeah. Oh, big deal. The entire media has been liberal my entire life, so finally there's an alternative, and they're all out of control. Apparently, Representative Maxine Waters thinks the media has a conservative bias. Well, let me give you a little history lesson, Maxine. Back in the old days, when there were fewer outlets for news on TV and radio, there used to be something called the Fairness Doctrine, which was supposed to guarantee even-handed reporting of issues. It was supposedly designed to ensure that the owners of TV and radio stations weren't biased. But as time went on, new channels and stations came into being, and the FCC decided that since there were so many opinions available to the public, the Fairness Doctrine had lost its usefulness and it was discontinued. But nowadays, Rep. Waters and the left, if you remember Hillary and Bill and Kennedy, are all using the allegations of a conservative bias to lay the groundwork to bring back the so-called unfairness doctrine. It is ridiculous. And in just a minute, my guest, Peter Collins, will give you his first-hand experience of the liberal bias that's everywhere in the media. But first, what is going on in Aaron Brown's mind when he agreed to take money, that's the guy on CNN who looks down at everybody and sneers, to make an infomercial that was set up to look like a newscast? He was about to join the very distinguished company of Walter Cronkite and Morley Safer in that enterprise before people made a fuss about his journalistic integrity, and he backed off. So it turns out that our fair and balanced liberals are not so fair and not so balanced, okay? Now they all backed away from it. Well, right now we have with us in the studio a man who knows the inside, and I'd like to go to our guest right away. Peter Collins, welcome to the Savage Nation.
Dr. Savage, it's a pleasure to be on your program.
Peter, I've seen you on TV, and I really liked what I've seen. And even though you've appeared on other shows, I knew that once we talked, we'd come up with some new things. First of all, please tell the viewers what your background is in the electronic media.
Michael, I was in broadcast news for 30 years with 5 major broadcast news organizations, the Voice of America, the BBC, CBS News, ABC News, and finally and briefly with CNN.
Do you think that the average viewer out there is aware how subtle and widespread the liberal bias really is, Peter?
I don't think the average viewer has a clue. Well, I shouldn't say that because viewers are turning in droves to channels like Fox News and to you, Michael Savage. So they sense that something is wrong. But as to the techniques that are used in the background to slant the news, no, I don't think they really know.
So when you were in there, Peter, to be honest, did you notice the liberal bias while you were in there? Of course, everyone has to make a living. I'm not criticizing you. But when did you first notice the liberal bias? Was it a long time ago or recently?
Well, it was a long time ago, but you know, Michael, I went into the business thinking, well, it's going to be fair and balanced, right? And it took me years and years and years to realize this is the way it is and it's not going to change. And I began resisting, and eventually the system spit me out. I was fired from CBS, I was fired from ABC News, and I was fired from the Voice of America for not being politically correct.
Oh, you didn't play ball. Well, I noticed you said you're fluent in Spanish. I think you said you grew up in South America. Isn't that true?
Correct.
Okay, and the reason I'm raising this issue is because there's a very big story that you're about to tell about the Nicaraguan situation and the Ortega Marxist regime. Could you tell us that story? Because that's a heck of a story right there.
Well, in 1989, I was assigned by Peter Jennings to do a piece on the 10th anniversary of the Sandinista Revolution in Nicaragua. And let's be clear, that was a communist revolution.
Right.
So they sent down a producer from New York, a young guy. He was open-minded. We went to a place outside the capital of Nicaragua, Managua. This place was called Monimbo. It was a place where indigenous people lived, and they were said by the Sandinistas to be the ones who created the revolution. Well, we went there, and they would not want to come on camera. They wouldn't want to talk about it.
You mean the implication was that the indigenous, in other words, Indian people, were the ones behind the Marxist revolution?
Yes, they were credited by the Sandinistas for being the real voice of the people. So 10 years later, they don't want to talk on camera. We do 5 or 6 days worth of research on this. We send a script up to New York. The phone rings, and it's a producer from New York, World News Tonight, and he says, Peter has problems with the script. He was referring to Peter Jennings. So the producer and I worked on this. We sent up some changes. The next day, the phone rings. It's Peter Jennings himself. And he says, Peter, can we make this script a little more positive?
Positive about what?
Positive about the Sandinistas and
positive
their revolution.
About the Marxist revolution.
So what happened, Michael, is essentially he dictated to me 2 or 3 lines concerning the Sandinista revolution, which I then had to read. And the funny thing is, Michael, 2 weeks later, a conservative watchdog group accuses me of, quote, trumpeting the Sandinista line.
Well, okay, I've heard someone argue with you and say to you, well, it was Peter's show, Peter Jennings, he had a right to state what he wanted. You were really working for him. That is true, but what you're saying is, given that that is so, that it is his show, he was still pushing forth an extreme leftist line that he wanted projected, even if it was not true.
Correct, unfortunately correct. And, you know, I have read, ABC, on a previous show that I appeared, sent down the script of the piece as it appeared on the air. What they didn't send down, and which I was able to correct, was the material that was left out of the piece. If you've got a second, I can read you some of it.
I want to ask you something first. This is very important. The liberals in America always trying to tell us that it's indigenous this, indigenous that the real people wanted the revolution in Nicaragua, meaning the natives or the Indians. What other examples like this in your experience in the media come to mind? Your experience with liberal bias in the media that's so clear as that, Peter?
Well, look, we have examples recently in Iraq where the major media essentially allowed themselves to be manipulated by the Saddam Hussein regime in order to retain access.
How about Dan? You know, the one that really struck me was the CBS visit by Dan Rather. Was it Dan Rather who went over there? To sat there at Saddam's feet with that puffball interview?
Yes, yes.
I thought that was a disgrace. In fact, when I had my MSNBC show on the week after, I went on and I insisted that we run the footage, Peter, of the atrocity footage, even though it was from 1988, the gassing of the Kurds and whatnot, because I said this is what was missing. This is what Dan should have run to put that interview in context. Of course he was frightened of the guy. The guy was a certifiable lunatic. But don't you think Rather could have encircled that interview afterwards with some footage in order to present a balanced picture?
Well, of course, but the problem is that with the Minders system that existed in Iraq until April the 9th, no camera crew could go to, for example, Baghdad University or any poor neighborhood and expect to get a candid opinion from the people there, because they would be killed. But we weren't told this. The reporters and broadcasters did not tell us that they were working under this system of Minders.
Peter, quickly now, in the minute that's left, this fairness doctrine is a ruse, isn't it? Isn't it an attempt to make certain that conservative views get run over again by liberalism? Isn't that what it's all about?
Well, I don't think that's going to happen, Michael, because the things are changing. Here we are on MSNBC discussing this very issue.
Yeah?
This could not have happened 5 years ago. I think we're looking at a media revolution, a wave that is breaking onshore. It's been building for 15 years. You now have Fox, you have MSNBC changing its tone a bit,
well,
and people
I wouldn't
understand
say that the network is changing the tone because there's a few guys on. Peter, we're almost out of time. I want to congratulate you. I want to thank you for coming forward. Peter, thank you very, very much. When we come back, it's time for the news of the week. And, of course, the Hollywood idiot. The Academy has sent their legal goons after Michael Savage, saying you can't use that golden idol anymore. You can't touch our golden calf. You can put, I guess, a cross in a jar of urine. They didn't say that. The Academy is after me. Find out why and find out what I'm going to do to get around their attempts to put tape over my mind. This is the Savage Nation. Be here or be nowhere. Welcome back to the Savage Nation. Now let's see what's making headlines in the Savage Times, where the slogan is, all the truth that's not in print. The first big story is morality, the lack of it, the need for it, and the public humiliation of the man who claimed it, but has been proven to be as, let's say, off the mark as it gets. It's not exactly immorality, but it's called hypocrisy. And here is Bill Bennett. Poor man.
We live in an all too cynical age.
Oh.
There's too much cynicism in America.
Why are we cynical, Bill?
The hearts of those who hold it.
Oh, Bill, come on.
Our nation is uglier, angrier, narrower because of that cynicism.
Nonsense. Cynicism is good. It's healthy.
The moral power of example.
No, yeah. Why was cynical? Can you imagine? Why was cynical? For years, Bennett has made a fortune selling virtue in his books and lecturing about morality, $50,000 a pop. He's also been running up an $8 million debt at some of the finer casinos on the Vegas Strip, according to the newspapers. Apparently, he's one of those do as I say, not as I do guys. Now, I have nothing against gambling. I don't personally gamble myself, okay? But I don't lecture people about not to gamble or not to do this, not to do that. Now, I've heard that people have said he's never told anyone not to gamble. Well, excuse me, that's begging the question. I remember once being in Israel at the Wailing Wall, and I met some Orthodox Jewish guys, some young guys. They were doing everything right. They were in black, and they were praying, and they were touching the wall, and they're putting in cards. And one of them was a heroin addict. And when I found that out, I said to him, how can you claim to be a religious man and be putting junk in your arm? He says to me, nowhere in the Bible does it say that you cannot be a heroin addict. I mean, this to me is another stunning example of moral lapses in America, by the way. I'm sorry, Bill Bennett, you're wrong, and no matter how many of the conservatives step forward and defend you, they're wrong. And by the way, this is what gives Republicans the name hypocrite too often. In another stunning example of moral decay, the Young Women's Christian Association, the YWCA, has appointed none other than Pat Ireland to head this organization. Now, if you don't know who she is, she's a left-wing former head of the Feminist National Organization for Women. She's an admitted bisexual. Is it time to take the C, or Christian, out of the Y? Because this just is not Christian. And while you're at it, take out the W, because she'll probably open the group up to transsexuals. And by the way, the LA Times has given an award to a book, their book award, their #1 book award, LA Times, to a book that calls for lowering the age of sexual consent to age 12. I'll say that again. Do you want your daughter or your son having sex at age 12? I will not mention the book's name because it does not deserve the publicity of the savage nation. But it is supposedly a legitimate exploration of children's sexuality. Now, among the offensive and degenerate ideas in this rag is praise for the idea of a child care center. Well, listen to this, where children of all ages engage in masturbation without shame and have consensual sex with other children. Is it any wonder that your children have a tough time reading, writing, and adding up a column of figures 3 in a row? This is what they're teaching them? I don't even know where to begin. Even sex expert Dr. Ruth, a notorious liberal, says that this book is trash. Well, you don't need an expert to tell you it's trash. It's degenerate. Also, in the Savage Times, George W. Bush, in the war in Iraq, we all know he was right. He was 100% right for liberating the Iraqi people. I've said that. But is President Bush now starting to turn left? Let's look at the evidence. Take a look at this incredible graphic. I love this. You know, this is a great little graphic. Nice sound. Nice sound. Is he turning left? He is. And that's because his advisors have told him, you got the right wing with the war, and now turn to the left and win the left wing. He is at odds with his great supporters in the National Rifle Association because he just came out supporting continuing the ban on semi-automatic so-called assault rifles. Now, in this case, he agrees with the most radical liberals. The Christian Coalition is already upset with him, by the way, for what? Because he didn't back Senator Rick Santorum immediately. He let Santorum dry out there in the sun when Santorum made some uncomfortable remarks where he sort of compared homosexuality to incest and adultery. He didn't really do that, but he made a sort of subtle comparison. And then there's that $15 billion for AIDS relief in Africa and the Caribbean. I'm totally opposed to it for a number of reasons. But isn't all of this social liberalism? It's also time for this week's Hollywood Idiot. This week's winner, well, it's a man who calls himself an actor. But it's basically he's a telephone salesman, and not even a very good one at that. He's also a big fan of Fidel, a Stalinist dictator whose people live in poverty and fear and hunger, and they were executed a few weeks ago. How could they do that? Ed Asinine, a former Hollywood idiot, is also a Fidel fan, as is Jimmy Carter and Barbara Boxer. This Hollywood idiot recently signed a declaration that supports Castro, expressing concern that the U.S. might invade Cuba. Sounds like a good idea to me. So who is the idiot? Take a look. And this week's soon-to-be-named award goes to none other than Danny Glovia. Via con Dios, Danny, but believe me, you ought to stick to telephone ads where they can give you a teleprompter to read. Let's go to our callers right now in the Savage Nation, 1-888-MSNBC USA. Is that what it is? No, it's 888-MS. Yeah, I got the number in my head. I'm down on that one. Wendy, San Francisco, welcome. Sorry, hit the wrong number. Give me number 4. 5 is off. Wendy, what's on your mind?
Michael.
Yo.
You rock.
I do.
And here's a name for the ox cur.
Ox cur.
Melt the statue down.
Yes.
What's left is Bollywood's opinion is worth a golden cow pie.
Golden cow pie. Very funny. Thanks for that call, Wendy. We're going to go to break right now. We'll come back for more of your calls right here in the Savage Nation. I'm starting to get my San Francisco. I'm getting my New York. I'm getting my Texas. I'm getting my Chicago. I'm getting my West Palm Beach. I'm getting my Seattle. I'm getting my San Diego. They're finding out that it's worth staying home on a nice Saturday just to listen to me, the greatest name in cable television. By the way, what's the greatest threat to America today? What is it? You haven't heard it yet, because I'm going to give it to you. What is the greatest threat to America today? It's not liberalism. Stick around. I'll let you know what it is when I come back right here in the Savage Nation, okay? That's it.
Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?
Yeah, okay. Well, I've been asking that question about the liberals for a long time. I know they have no sense of shame and no sense of decency. Many of you may be too young to know who Senator Joe McCarthy was. And if you do know, you've probably heard only one side of the story. So let's start your education in Savage School by asking a question. What do you think is the greatest threat to America? Is it external, like terrorism? Or is there a greater danger already inside the borders in the liberal left? I want to slow down for a minute. In my book, The Savage Nation, I say, saving America from the liberal assault on our borders, language, and culture. But now I want to turn into the inner enemy and the cultural enemies. Back in the 50s, Senator McCarthy conducted an investigation to ferret out and expose what he said were communist ferrets in government, in the media. In the process, he earned a reputation as the most reviled politician in recent history. Many of you think he's a certifiable villain. Now, where did that reputation come from? And why is the left still trying to tarnish his name all of a sudden 50 years later? Are they trying to cover up the mounting evidence that McCarthy was not all wrong, maybe even right? Well, here to talk with everybody about this is Herbert Ramerstein, a former officer of the United States Information Agency and author of The Venona Secrets, a book I've referred to on my radio show an awful lot. It's about Soviet espionage in World War II. Welcome, Mr. Ramerstein. Welcome to the Savage Nation.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, look, you were alive during that period. That's why it's important for you. You're a real witness to this. Herb, tell us what you think about the word McCarthyism to begin with. What was it? I mean, why is McCarthyism a dirty word?
McCarthyism was a word invented by the communists. Just as a decade earlier, they invented a word, Trotskyism, and millions of people were murdered in the Soviet Union who had no relationship to Leon Trotsky. The word McCarthyism was a smear word to use against anybody that told the truth about the communists. But you know, when you see what the ultra-left says, you know that in a short time you'll be hearing it from the liberals. So the current issue of The Nation magazine, which is a ultra-left voice, points out that the reason for them studying this 50-year-old argument about what McCarthy said or what he didn't say is because they want to use it against Ashcroft and to say that the United States wants to persecute those nice terrorists the way they claimed that McCarthy was
this is what I sensed. All of a sudden last Monday on the front of the New York Times, It was sort of a revisionist look at McCarthy and what was he doing. And they said that he was all wrong, just a bully. Now, he was a bully. He was a demagogue. There's no question about it. But your book, The Venona Papers, is based upon real evidence. So where does that evidence derive from, Herb?
From the communist Soviet Union, transmissions to their officers in the United States who are handling the spies in the State Department, in the Defense Department, or at that time War Department, even in the White House. And those documents, together with some that my wife and I obtained in the Moscow archives, showed that there was an incredibly effective operation within the United States government by the Soviet intelligence service during World War II and just after.
Well, what about Hollywood? Let's cut to Hollywood. I remember reading some of these transcripts. I was raised to believe they were all innocent. And, you know, Zero Mostel threw himself out of a window in a movie because he was persecuted by a McCarthy-like character. Was there a bias in Hollywood that presented sort of the Marxist picture at that time?
There was a very serious bias. There were a number of movies. For example, you might see the movie Mission to Moscow, which was a straight Soviet propaganda movie that defended the Moscow purge trials. Years later, Khrushchev pointed out that they were all frame-ups. But back in those days, Hollywood was producing films that said that the purge trials were right.
Well, why is this coming up now? Why is Carl Levin, the guy who wears the glasses on his nose, trying to look like Ben Franklin, suddenly starting to dredge this up? I think you implied it before, Herb, when you said what they're getting at is John Ashcroft, our great Attorney General, by the way, in my opinion, doing a great job. After all, there hasn't been one incident since 9/11, obviously because the FBI is able to do its job finally. The left is screaming uncle because, what, the jig is up? What's going on here? Is that what they're afraid of, that they're going to be found out for what they're really doing to us?
The same bunch of left-wing lawyers that used to defend the communists are out there today defending the terrorists who get arrested.
Unbelievable. What, you mean the National Lawyers Guild, the ACLU, the usual suspects?
The usual suspects, the National Lawyers Guild, a few days after 9/11, issued a document to Arab Americans telling them not to cooperate with the FBI, not to give the U.S. government any information that they might have.
Unbelievable. You know, Herb, I've read that some liberal cities, San Francisco, God knows where, they're not going to cooperate with the federal government. Are these leftists stupid? Don't they understand that if a bomb goes off or a well is poisoned or a dam is broken, that it's not going to discriminate, that they will be affected as well? Do they really understand that or not?
Well, they don't expect to be directly affected, but more important, they support America's enemies. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, and America's enemies are their friends.
It's that bad, Herb. You still see the same dangers to our republic as you did in the 50s, Herb?
There's no Soviet Union pointing missiles at us. There's still a communist Cuba persecuting people and trying to do acts against the United States, North Korea and so on. But there's no Soviet Union. Nevertheless, the same old Soviet stooges are still in business promoting America's enemies.
Well, we didn't get to some of the other questions, such as HUAC. Is it time to bring back a House Committee of Un-American Activities? Are we ready for that? Because I'd love to do that if we have some time. I would really like to do that. In your opinion, is there any senator currently serving who could qualify in any way to investigate the leftist enemies of America? Is there any such true conservative who wouldn't be shot down immediately, Herb?
I think there are some good conservatives, but I don't think they have the knowledge or the understanding that's needed to do a proper job in this area.
Herbert, look, you did a great book, author of The Venona Secrets. I want to thank you for taking the trouble to come out on a nice Saturday. Thanks for your insights. We'll get you back maybe next week. That'll do it for the Savage Nation this week. Remember to email your Hollywood Idiot Trophy suggestions to savagenation@msnbc.com and watch me and listen to me and buy the hat and wear the shoes and try to save America. It's no joke. Savage. I'm not an ordinary talk show host.